Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, and welcome, Devin. I'm going to turn it over to Devin. I can give a quick intro, and I'll let you take it from there. Devin is a insight meditation teacher and teaches often with the Insight Meditation Society. He's also a community teacher with the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, and is co-founded the Teen and Men of Color Sangha that's there. Currently residing in Western Massachusetts. Zoom has enabled us to be able to bring people together from all over the world. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. So I wanted to add, let's see here. As David said, I teach most often now at IMS. It's part of the reason for the move. I was in the 4-year retreat teacher training program. My main mentors are Joseph Goldstein and Carol Wilson, along with Andrea Fella. Larry Yang was my first mentor, along with a woman named Lynn Fine in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition. I first started sitting a little bit at SF Zen Center because it was around the corner from where I lived at the time, and I wanted to learn meditation. I ran into the late Isan Dorsey on the street in Castro and sat a few times at Hartford Street. So those are sort of the beginning of my meditation. With Isan, I think he was in his Zen, the outfit that they wore, which I had never seen before. And I asked him what I said. I mean, I was a young kid, a smart ass, and I think I asked him what sort of dress, what sort of costume are you wearing? And that sparked a conversation, and I ended up at Hartford Street sitting a couple of times. So I'm here today, and I will offer some reflections on Mudita, or joy in the practice, bringing joy in the practice, looking for joy in the practice. And it's not something I do often, but I think over this past year or so, there's been a number of folks that I've lost and acquaintances and sort of dealing with the isolation of being inside and lockdown and all of those things, and news and politics, and sort of finding myself. I think Sharon Salzberg coined the term doom scrolling. So I sort of found myself doom scrolling on my phone or on my iPad with just waiting for the latest bad news and sort of having that compounded. And I found myself just sort of living and swimming in what was wrong and what was happening. And I really needed a shift in practice. So I actually shifted to doing some formal Brahmavihara practice, which is my main practice, metta. But I rarely got to joy. It was compassion or metta that I was working with. And there was something in being able to spark, sort of pilot light in the heart with a little bit of lightness and a little bit of joy occasionally that I really saw a profound shift in my own practice. And I know from the teachings of the Buddha talks about inclining the mind or brightening the mind. And an easy way or an easier way to do that is to also know and to understand and to be clear that I think it was Helen Keller that said the world is full of suffering and the overcoming of it, that is the case. It's the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows that the Buddha talked about. And we often see the practice as, or at least I did, can be a grim endeavor. And it was sort of looking at suffering. And I oftentimes found myself looking for it, which you really don't have to do when sort of, if we looked at, I don't know where anybody is on the political spectrum, doesn't matter. But in this mind, if I looked at over the last 4 years or so, then for me, I saw a manifestation of greed, hatred, and delusion. And that's what was projected to all of us. And it felt like just my immediate circle of friends and the wider circle of friends were sort of mired in that. So I was interested in sparking a little joy. And it's interesting because once you do spark a little joy, then you actually get to see, right? The heart is like makes relentless movements towards awakening, towards freedom, the more and more you incline the heart in that direction. And it's not today, it's not immediate and all of that, but it does remove or take you out of this place of the constant doom scrolling and sort of being mired in the impact of the ongoing pandemic and politics and all the rest of it. So I wanted to read a little bit. So when I was a number of the years living in the Bay, I taught kindergarten and I taught young people. And oftentimes, as an effort to bring my practice into the classroom or the workspace, wherever I was working with them, I often had conversations around some of the practice ideas of the heart practices, just to sort of spark some of that. Oftentimes what I found with particularly younger people is that though there seemed to be a lot of happiness and laughter and all that sort of thing, it was actually, and this is what I would talk to them about, it wasn't the sort of an authentic happiness or joy. It was Schadenfreude. Or so the happiness or joy that was there was looking at or being quite active in the misfortunes of or misery of others, right? Whether it's sort of a slapstick thing where you're watching someone fall on the ice, or you're watching something, possibly pretty painful or harmful happen to someone, and there's the funny element to it, but that's sort of where they found their happiness and joy. And I always found that quite interesting and quite disturbing at the same time. So some of the things that I heard from some of these particular group of kids, I think, are first or second grade, so 7 or 8 years old. And this is what some of them said in terms of, in regards to me asking them about joy and happiness. So one kid said, if I win first place and somebody else wins second place, I'm happy for them. And that's not quite joy and happiness, right? There's a lot of self-interest there, right? I'm happy for you if you finish behind me. And another kid said, I guess if I met someone named Joy, I would be happy because their name is Joy. They've got to be happy, right? And another young girl said, I feel joy when I see a family laughing together, especially if the mother snorts or cries while laughing like my mom. That's real joy. Sometimes even if we make her laugh really hard, she pees in her pants a little bit. She gets mad, but I think it's a happy mad. Another one, the kids called me Papa Bear. And aside to that, a really humbling experience, right? I'm an older guy with a big stomach, so to have all the kids pat my stomach and say, oh, there's a baby in there, it's an incredibly humbling experience. So the kids would say, when Papa Bear tells us a scary story, I'm happy for him because he likes it. I don't particularly like it, but everyone else does. That's a kind of a scary joy, I guess. And then, of course, when I taught mindfulness at a number of the schools, and they would say, when the mindfulness teacher comes to visit, everybody is kind afterwards. I feel happy and I feel joyful. So from the kids, I feel like I've learned actually quite a bit of my practice has been tested in those arenas. There's another story to illustrate this open-hearted delight and enjoyment of each other. So Mari Sindak is an illustrator, children's book writer, wrote a book called Where the Wild Things Are. It's about, I believe, if I remember, this boy, Max, gets sent to bed without his dinner, and he's fired up and really mad. So Sindak tells a story about a little boy who wrote him a letter expressing his appreciation for where the wild things are. He said, so the boy sent me a lovely card with a drawing. I loved it very much. I answered all the kids' letters, sometimes quite hastily, but this one I lingered over. I sent the boy a postcard and drew a picture of a wild thing. Dear Jim, I wrote, I loved your card. Soon afterwards, I got a letter back from Jim's dad, and he said, Jim loved your card so much, he ate it. Sindak says, that to me was one of the highest compliments I'd ever received. He didn't care that it was an original Maurice Sindak drawing, probably worth tens of thousands of dollars or anything. He saw it, he loved it, and he ate it. I've considered that appreciative joy at its finest. So, and I use those stories really just to illustrate a bit of spark and joy into the practice, which I then try to carry off onto the cushion. And noticing of over this past year that there is joy actually inherent in the capacity to sit with whatever is going on in our mind and body at any given moment. And the viewing of that with any interest and with any curiosity is the Dharma at work, resting in awareness. And these heart qualities are not solely based on conditions, but we know the stories and the habits, and we also know that the pause allows us to not be caught or to be less caught up. And that when we are less caught up, there's more possibility of the arising of joy. And that's an incredibly powerful place to be. And it's a beautiful insight that's onward leading to freeing the mind. Just in terms of the meditative process itself, being able to begin your meditative process here and there with heart practices, whether that's metta or whether that's joy, whether that's quite literally listening to a piece of music in headphones before meditating, not doing anything else, not journaling or thinking about anything else, just actually absorbing yourself in that. And then going into formal meditation, the Vipassana insight meditation. It actually allows the mind to be a little bit more settled. And the possibility of having the mind a little bit more settled actually allows for that openness, allows for joy to arrive, allows for the possibility of sitting with some balance or equanimity. And ultimately, I think that's what the joy has done to me. It's allowed me to see all that's happening around me with some equanimity, not every day, not every moment, but more often than not. It allows me to see when there's this blueness, when there's this depression that comes over me, that it's truly a visitor. It's truly a visitor. But if I don't have anything to spark that pilot light, then I have a tendency to stay there. It stays longer and longer and longer. So appreciative joy. And joy, and so when I'm talking about joy as well, so I'm including in that generosity as well and gratitude as well. That's sort of a package of all of those as a package. And I've had an opportunity to see this in my own practice. I have had a great passion for long intensive retreat. I like to take the classical teachings of the Buddha from that conceptual and cognitive place and see them unfold experientially. And I'm able to do this with a good amount of time on intensive retreat. And there's a particular time I was working with Joseph on long retreat, and I'd been there for about six or 7 weeks, headed into the latter part of a 3-month retreat. And I started to get sick, cold that turned into what I thought was a little bit of a flu. And up until that point, a lot of my practice was concentration practice. And so this was going to derail my concentration practice. I had taken time off work, and now here I am sick, and I'm going to be out for days and days, right? The mind starts to spin out in all those stories. And I'd gone to visit him for our practice interview, and I was sitting all the way by the door, not near the desk, because I didn't want to get him sick. And he said, well, do you have a chair in your room? And my first thought was, well, this is an absolutely ridiculous question. I don't know what this has to do with what I'm talking to you about. And I said, yeah, I have a chair in my room. And he said, well, maybe try just sitting in the chair. Just sit in the chair. Just sit there. See what happens. Okay. So I go back to the room and I sit in the chair and I determine that I'll just sit here and see what happens. And of course, my eyes are watering. My body temperature is hot. I can feel the heat. My nose is running. I'm coughing. And I'm sitting in the chair. And I'm knowing all of these things. And I'm observing all of these things. And it's not any different from my meditation with him guiding me or me sitting in the hall doing it. And it seems like a simple, easy thing, but my conditioning has always been that I get sick and mommy or somebody needs to take care of me. I can't actually function. And this was countered all of that. And it really had me see, one, the light effort that the practice actually takes, though incredibly simple. The effort was notice everything that's happening. There was nothing for me to do. And it was actually interesting to be sick and do that. It was easier to be sick and notice all those things happening than the usual over-efforting that I did with everything else. And so immediately after having that experience of, or the experience of understanding that I had the capacity to be with this and that I could actually be with this, then joy flooded the entire body. And it's a joy of relief, a joy of this practice works, a joy of this path works. And there's a lightness and there's a giddiness. And there's equanimity. There's balance. The Pali word is tatra madhyatata, standing in the middle of all of this. And that's what it was. I was able to stand in the middle of all of this, which just brings more joy. And from that point, he helped me discover that oftentimes, right, when joy is there, then we notice it, we laugh, we smile, there's a lovely warm feeling, and then we're on to the next thing. But he said, you know, as I do with some of the concentration practices, to actually sustain that joy. So it's almost like there's a pilot light and I'm just sort of fanning the flame. So just allowing that to fill the entire body, to fill the mind and to radiate that outward. And it's been, my meditation practice has profoundly changed just with that. And I've been able to do that in conjunction oftentimes with dropping in an inquiry of what's the attitude of mind right now? Because I would have told you at some point in time for many years that I'm not a morning person. Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee. Bite your head off. Asking, dropping that inquiry in regularly and often, and it's something that doesn't require a formal sitting practice to do. It's actually quite portable. And asking yourself 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, what's the attitude of mind? What's the flavor of mind right now? What's the tone of mind right now? Allows you to snap back into the present moment and a moment of mindfulness. And we know that the proximate cause of a moment of mindfulness is another moment of mindfulness. And so to be able to do that, you're able to bring yourself back to the present. So a combination of using that inquiry and occasionally dropping in phrases from metta or something like that, because I found it actually much more easier to do it in this stealth metta way than in a formal sitting practice throughout the day. I was able to do that, and I was less judgmental towards myself and definitely less judgmental to folks that I ran into the street or saw in the workplace or other things like that. And all of that is allowed for just, you know, my joy meter to be a little bit higher in general all of the time. And when I mean all the time, I mean all the time. The idea of, again, of me being not a morning person is gone. That's an idea. It's not there. And so I began to look into other things that had been difficulties in my life or problems in my life that I just would chew on and gnaw on and go over and over again. And so one that's been obvious for me for many years is tinnitus in the ear, ringing in the ear, which I had always seen as a problem. And don't get me wrong, I would rather not have it than have it. But when it is there, through the teachings of Ajahn Sumedho, who teaches about the sound of silence, if you ever have an opportunity to listen to him give talks about the sound of silence, or there's a couple of chapters in one of the books he has, he references this practice called the sound of silence. And it is something in some of the early Tibetan teachings, Nada Yoga, it's there, looking at the sound of silence. So with this tinnitus, then I would, rather than hear it come up and hear it as a problem and back off from my meditation because it was deafening, it all got reframed as something to listen to. And when I can reframe it as something to listen to, then it's not possible to have that sound of silence and repetitive thoughts or obsessive thoughts or anger or anything else. It's not possible for both of those things to be there at the same time. They can come one after the other, one mind moment after the other, but essentially that sound of silence is there. And when I listen to it, it actually becomes quite a nourishing thing. It's interesting, right? I'm listening to it with some interest and some curiosity. The tone changes, the depth of it changes. Here and there's a stop, start. And as I'm noticing all of these, the body, the nervous system itself is ratcheting down, is calming down, is slowing down. Same thing happens. There's an understanding immediately in the mind that I have the capacity to be with this. The mind settles, the heart opens, joy arises, equanimity or balance is there. And I've watched that over and over again. And it's one of those things, one joy and byproduct or side effect of me teaching on Zoom is with one earbud in, the sound of silence is there also. So when there's complete silence in the room, I can listen to that. It calms me down. When I get off the call, there will be nothing but the sound of silence. And I can sit here in this chair for 10, 15, 20 minutes with that sound of silence. And joy will arise. And it might not be big bang, Devin's, bathed in brilliant white light or anything. It just might be, I feel okay. I feel okay. I feel all right. So joy is included in, I feel okay. All of that. So all of those practices have been incredibly helpful. And it's allowed me also then to see, well, when I don't have time to sit or when I don't want to sit or when I want to explore other practices, then I take all of those practices outside. And we're entering in, or at least in New England here, where we've been in winter and darkness, right? We've had the equinox, so the days are equal. There'll be a lot more light, and we're out from under the snow until we're not. It'll be back, I'm sure, before full spring is here. But things start to grow. And the color, the smell, the sound of the birds, the trees, the flowers, all of those things that are interrelated to the rest of us. You get to have this experience of interbeing. The experience of interbeing allows us to actually feel an immense amount of joy. I mean, that's easy. That's where you actually, it's really interesting. It's almost, I've oftentimes framed it as the dream is free, like all this stuff, right? Spring happens, things grow. the dream is free. It's the hustle that's sold separately because you're still going to be listening to the news. It's still going to be listening to everything else and the taxes and getting wound up in that and forgetting that the whole, there's this whole world that's happening that is freely offering, in quite a generous way, this joy that's available to us and the gratitude that results from that. And it's interesting because it really feels like those, in looking for joy and pointing out the beauty, that we're just sort of watering seeds. A lovely teacher in Sebastopol, a woman who I think is retired at this point, Dr. Tintin, and she didn't have a meditation hall in her center there. There was an orchard, and there was a huge kitchen, and there was a stupa, and so you went to do work that was there. And she was really showing us that there wasn't a difference between the spiritual and the mundane, that there wasn't a difference between those things, that you could actually find joy and stillness in any of that. And so she would say, water everything. She'd say, honey, water everything. Water everything. Don't start picking and choosing or looking for certain things that you want to grow and water everything. And it reminded me of something. There was this from Rumi. If God said, pay homage to everything that has helped you enter my arms, there would not be one experience of my life, not one thought, nor one feeling, nor one act that I would not bow to. And that frame, that allows for the opening of the heart. That allows for some joy to be known in the practice. And it is to be known. If we are to believe or remotely believe the Buddhist teachings, then the gladdening of the mind is something that we should know. Inclining the mind is something that we should do. And you don't even have to take it on belief, right? You check it out. Ehi passiko. Check it out. And when you check it out, you see that there's already peace that's there. There's already freedom that's there. There's already spaciousness that's there. It's to be recognized, all waiting to be revealed, all waiting to be felt, all waiting to be turned to. But for the fact that greed, hatred, and delusion are being promoted at every turn in this world, we just need to back away here and there. We need to back away here and there. So I'm curious from yeah, I think I'll stop there. I think that's for me, that some of it ends up summing up. It's like all those things are there. Again, the dream is free. It's the hustle that's sold separately for $19.95, for $2,500, whatever it is. All of that, all the extra is being sold to you. So I'm curious of thoughts, questions, concerns. Is this dude crazy? Something, anything. You can tell me anything. I might not have an answer. I'll have a response, but I might not have an answer. And I can expand on those reflections and the question. I like to engage with folks. So I'm curious where you've seen this in your own practice, the difficulties of bringing joy to your practice. What do you do that sparks that joy? That maybe you're not even seeing that as part of your practice, when in fact that is this joyful thing that's there. And David, are folks able to write it in the chat if they want, or speak it either?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that is to let invite people if they want to put a question or comments in the chat, or if you want to share something, vocally, please. I see someone just wrote, like, I love your perspective that emphasizes joy is always there for us. From Christian.
It is. It's still fairly new. Like I said, this is a couple years for me, and I think I got tired of grim endeavor at times rather than centering joy. I see a hand from someone.
Yeah, my name's Grisha. Can you hear me okay? Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your talk. It's joyful. And I happen to be experiencing some really deep joy right now. I'm at a friend's house in Sebastopol and sitting in the backyard in the sunshine, listening to your Dharma. And I wonder if I can flip my camera here. I was looking at this beautiful succulent and how fascinating it is, all these little things inside. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about people who were just murdered and how, we're going back to school. The parents are really angry at the teachers and, there's so much suffering. And then I think, how is this joyful moment helping with the Bodhisattva vow of ending suffering?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think they are, in opposition to each other. And I know for myself in looking at joy. So actually in teaching a class at EBMC, I taught one time during a murder of a young Black man, giant protest happening in Oakland. And I'm ending this last class in the series and I'm teaching the class. And it was really interesting because from the meditation itself, I didn't guide it. It was a silent meditation, but what was known and visible to us were the batons of the officers on the side of the building because you could see out the window, the helicopters that were there, the sirens, the chanting, the yelling, all of those things were there. And people began to see that they actually had the capacity to be with all of those things. And the joy that's in there actually leads to compassionate action. It leads to agency, which allows some, if they're comfortable, if they're so inclined, to go out. It actually allows you to be fortified. You're not going out in anger. You're going out completely and totally fortified. That anger can be channeled into a rage that takes you to the voting booth, that takes you to service, that takes you being able to speak truth to power. So I don't see them as being like opposite or needing to be opposite or separate things. Absolutely, those things are there. I mean, I've had the experience actually then of leaving, and there was an immediate curfew set in Oakland, but I was teaching, so it was late. I was leaving, walking home, trying to walk through side streets, stopped with the police officers. By the time that interaction ended, the police officer's foot was on my head and there at my face was on the gutter sidewalk. So all of that, right? Through all of that, and it's not a bypass at all. I was completely and fully aware and conscious that all of that was actually happening and I had to be with it. And I could feel the anger and I had compassion for myself. And I had a little bit of compassion of understanding freaking idea of what he was doing. So all of that can actually be there. And so I think at times it feels like the most basic form of activism that we can actually have is to be clear and conscious in a world that is living in fantasy. Mm. That's baseline before getting anywhere else.
Thank you, Devin.
Sure.
Clint put in the chat, and then I see Chris has his hand up. Clint asks, could you expand on the process of self-inquiry you do during the...
Yeah, it really comes from there's a Burmese teacher, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, and he often asks in the meditation practice that you ask yourself, what's most obvious in my experience right now? Sometimes I'll just say, what's obvious? What's most prominent in my experience? What's the attitude of mind? And I'm trying to get at the attitude of mind I'm trying to get at is that underlying anger that's there, that underlying anxiety that's there, any of those other little feelings that are actually driving the bus. And we're not knowing it through the day. You know, we seem on one hand, we're talking to people and conversing and all these other things are happening. And there's this real funky mood that's actually clouding and covering the entire body. Asking yourself, what's the attitude of the mind helps to cut through that. And I literally had them on Post-it notes. I had a few printed on little business cards that I had in my pocket until I could just remember them. And now it's automatic. So at some point in time, it's not every hour on the hour, but it's many times a day. I do actually ask myself that question as a light mental note, right? It's a really light mental note. It's not anything I'm saying out loud, but it's there. Does that make sense, Chris? Clint. Sorry, Clint.
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris,
I don't have so much a question as just I've been looking at joy more in my life too now, and I realized that I'm taking a lot of walks, so the joy may just come out of the awe of spring arising, or the joy may be I'll be at a small park watching a child go down a slide or zipping by on a blade, and I can feel the exuberance and the joy, and those moments I'm really trying to catch and sort of just let it wash over me and through me, and just using it as a medicine or a remedy to move through these difficult times that we're having. Thanks so much for your talk, Devin. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That's it. Well articulated. That's it right there. Allowing that to wash over you and absorb into the body. You're filling the body with it and allowing that to radiate. It is very much like a medicine, a needed medicine in this world. And I know at times it can seem Pollyannish and all of that, but that's right. That for me, that's my old conditioning. It's like, yeah. I hated metta practice. It seemed like it was a made up add-on by some Marin County hippies, you know, and in fact, it was what I most needed most. It was what I most needed. And once I finally was able to let it in, it was just that. I take it in as medicine.
Exactly. You start to sort of guilt trip yourself with like, I shouldn't feel this way.
Exactly.
And then you fall into that habitual rut of like, I need to fix something right now. I have to fix the world. How can I be happy with this going on? But even finding those moments of happiness, it's just hard.
Absolutely. They're there. I mean, I could go. There are a number of things that I believe are going on for me, going on for people in the community, going on for people in the LGBTIQ community, that are going on for Black folk, all of those things. And I'm not saying that none of those things are going on. And I'm not saying you bypass any of those things. What I am saying that those things are going on. Spring is happening. The child is playing. The flowers are there. The food is good. All of those things, to be able to, we can hold both of those things. We can hold both of those. There are times to memorialize and to be with the pain and the anger and the sorrow. Absolutely. You dive into that. And we dive into the other as well.
I see Jeff
Thank you.
has a hand up, and Coral also put a question in the chat. So maybe Jeff, if
Sure.
the group Coral's question after you, Jeff.
Sure. Thank you for a great talk, Devin. You said so many things that really inspired me, and it reminds me of a story of an experience I had years ago when I was just about a year into recovery from addiction, and I was talking to Ramdas, and I was telling him how hard I was working, how many meetings I was doing, the therapy I was doing, all the different things I was doing. And he said, that's all wonderful and good. I support that, and I support you. And he said, well, where's the joy? Where's the joy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where's the joy? I mean, this is, absolutely. Where is the joy? What I found in myself is like, believe it or not, and I never this was like secretly somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, I finally found something that I liked just as much as I did cocaine in the 80s. And that would be this practice and joy.
Yeah, right, right. And it's always available, like you said.
Always,
Yes.
always.
Thank you. Yes.
And I don't wreck the body to do it. And I don't wreck the bank account to do it.
Yeah.
Coral asks, lately I've been thinking about a sense of urgency taking away my joy. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Coral. Thank you. Good to see you again. I saw Coral this morning in teaching. The sense of urgency. The sense of urgency, I think, looking at the Buddhist cosmology is samvega, this sense to move towards awakening, this sense to move towards freedom, this sense of like including the bodhisattva vows, all of those are there. And at times, yeah, that can feel like it takes away the joy. But I think that's why it's also important to, in a wordless and really sort of what Chris was saying, and really from a place of not a conceptual place, not a cognitive place, an easy way to help with that is to be out in the natural world. Because the natural world holds all of those things. And so some of the joy, some of the explicit joy in the political realm, socio-political realm, financial realm, all of that stuff can be there. And it can be hard to find any joy in any of that. But this other thing that I did not create, but that I am a part of, is there. It's freely available, and I am to take in that. Sometimes the way that I'm able to work with not having a sense of joy anywhere else is in the sitting practice itself. And sometimes that may be sitting through complete confusion, sitting through not wanting to sit there, and then finally getting to a place of connecting with the breath and connecting with the body. And it's just the joy of the practice itself, the joy of hearing the Dhamma itself. They can be little teeny tiny things, but they can be, it helps us from not falling into this giant pit of despair of all of these other things. And you won't lose that sense of urgency that some Vega is actually there. It's there. It's like fuel. It feels like little bits of fuel to use for the practice itself.
Cass has his hand up.
Yep. Thank you for a great talk and a reminder of joy. I'm in a group of drag nuns that's dedicated to the promulgation of universal joy. And so when I get manifest in my habit and make up and take my drag search for joy to the streets, I encounter people, of all kinds. You have the people who I'm not going to give this queen any attention whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And you have people who are angry, you can tell, or hostile. And but you also find the people who are kind of on the lookout for delight. And so I just want to recommend, it doesn't have to be necessarily doing drag, but doing something that takes you out of yourself and gives people around you the opportunity to take themselves out of themselves, to participate in discovery, because I think discovery kind of engenders joy.
Beautiful. Thank you. The only part I would disagree with is I do actually suggest if the Senate and the House were in drag, I think we'd probably be okay. I'm pretty sure we would be okay. There would be a fundamental shift in things that are there. So maybe everyone doesn't need to be in drag, but a few should probably be required to be in drag. I think that might be all right. And is the discovery. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're going to encounter, right, what you're talking about. There are going to be, and I think it's shown, our conditioning is so deep that it's got to be one or the other. You can't have joy and you can't be an activist. You can't have joy and fight for freedom. You can't have joy. And that's just, I disagree with that. The path is against the stream, and that is something that is against the stream, and not everyone is going to be on board with it, and not everyone is going to be. It's not going to be a popular thing. It's not, and I'm okay with it not being a popular thing. I know that, and just in terms of actually having conversations with Emma Chodron and others, folks that were activists, and what drove them to the practice was the fact that there was no joy in their practice. They had no medicinal reference point. They had no spiritual reference point. They burned out and they found Buddhism. Mm-hmm. That's true as well.
It's sometimes the circuitous.
And now they are teaching, and
it's
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Circuitous route.
Yeah.
If there's anybody else I see Tom has his hand up. Tom?
Okay, found the mute button, unmute. Thank you, Devin. That was a really a good reminder about getting back to my own art practice, which you would think with this, all the spare time we've had the past year. And I have done it quite a bit, but I think throughout my life, that has been the one thing that I've used as a grounding tool, is a creative process and listening to music a lot of the time, and and looking at other artists' works, both on maybe Pinterest and other places where friends of mine post their work. And I think that's a really the process involved that I use is kind of a free form collage methodology, where I just, I take all these weird paper things that I have and I glue it on a board, and I don't try to preconceive what I'm after. I just it's like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what fits. And it's a really nice, freeing process that gives me a lot of joy, and it's doable. You can kind of contain it. It's, I'm not good at selling it, but I'm working on that. But that is like the process you were talking about, the very difficult thing with tinnitus, is how do I take my baggage I have around processes that are frustrating and really challenge my ADD, and keep trying it rather than running away from it. So that encouraged me in that department. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. The creative process. Complementary to the Dhamma. I mean, easy, an easy complementary practice is actually, going back to, you said, this creative process, whether it's creating art, enjoying art, creating music, enjoying music, to not see those things as foreign and totally separate, but to actually use them as complements. I mean, still one of my most favorite ways to be in a contemplative place or a meditative place is, again, sitting on the sofa, laying on the bed with some headphones on, just listening to music, not doing anything else. And my tendency is to journal or to eat at the same time or do something else. But sometimes just to do that one thing, the single task versus this idea of multitasking, that single task, just to do that. Whether it's gardening by yourself, quietly doing that. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that there are much better medicines than that, much better complements to the practice. Garden sit. Combination of that is actually quite profoundly beautiful.
Well, thank you, Devin, very much. We're about at time, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and thank everybody who came. Coral and Marcelo, welcome from your respective. And Jerry just posted next week's teacher, Melvin Escobar, will be here. His bio is on the Gay Buddhist website. And thank you for putting that, Jerry. I want to encourage everybody to contribute dana. Dana is the Pali word for giving. And the contributing to the Sangha supports our continuation of this group. It also supports our teachers every week. We continue to support the San Francisco Buddhist Center and their expenses, even though we're not there, to sustain them. So when we can return. Also on Wednesdays, there's a sitting group, and at 7:30, it's a 30-minute silent meditation followed by a group discussion. And it's the same link, and the details are on the website as well. Well, we can wrap up. So again, I want to thank you all for coming. May any merit that's been accumulated by our time together today, please, we send it out and dedicate it for the benefit of all beings. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be without the great bliss which is free from all suffering. And may all beings live in the great equanimity which is from all attachment and aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, David. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Devin.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.